If you were starting an NBA team right now and we had a draft, you could pick any player you wanted in the league. Anybody. You can have LeBron. You can have Embiid. You can have Simmons. You can have Porziņģis and his bad eyes if you want. You can have anybody that you want. But I make one little tweak to this question. One little change. I want to include coaches as well. How would your draft order go? It's the Cain Show on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80. Give me a call. Answer the question. 888-729-3776. Actually, let me change the question. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to clarify it. Let's just crystallize, clarify the question, okay? Before you give me a call, here's the question I want to ask you. How many players in the NBA would you draft, would you start your franchise with before you got to the name Brad Stevens? If I allowed you to take coaches as well, how many players would you take before you took Brad Stevens? Now, this comes to you, this thought experiment, this comes to you through two primary motivations. Number one, Nate Silver of 538 tweeted out last night this question. If you were starting an NBA team and wanted to maximize your chances of winning a championship over the next 5 seasons, who would you rather have? Giannis Antetokounmpo or Brad Stevens? 54% of the 27,000 people that responded to Nate's question, 54% said Giannis, to 46% saying Brad Stevens. And the other reason this comes up is, well, the Boston Celtics beat the Philadelphia 76ers 117-101 last night in a game that was never close. And what was clear is the Celtics won for 3 reasons. One was rest. The Philadelphia 76ers came out rusty. Second was depth. Guys like Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, even Marcus Smart, who didn't have the numbers that Rozier, Horford, and Tatum had. But Marcus Smart made winning plays like he always does. And third was coaching. Brad Stevens had a game plan. Brad Stevens absolutely was amazing last night. When asked, are you worried about Joel Embiid? He's going off. Embiid had almost 31 points. Stevens said, how many threes do they have? He knew what he wanted last night. He did not want the 76ers to shoot threes, and they didn't. They shot under 20%. Jalen Rose noticed Brad Stevens this morning on Get Up.
Player development is taking place with the Boston Celtics. I know NBA life seems like it happens in dog years, but this time last season, the Boston Celtics were the number 1 seed in the playoffs, led by Isaiah Thomas. He's on his 3rd team now.
That's
He's
crazy.
having hip surgery. Brad Stevens is still standing on the sideline. They lose Gordon Hayward. They lose Kyrie Irving. They have no Jaylen Brown. You have people that's saying that they're going to get swept by Philly, but yet the Boston Celtics find ways to continue to reinvent themselves, and it starts with Brad Stevens.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that exactly. They have the best coach in the game, and he was my coach of the year for a reason. And if you wonder just how much of a difference coaching can make on the NBA level, I think you were seeing evidence of that right there.
That's Mike Greenberg and Jalen Rose this morning on Get Up. First of all, is Brad Stevens the best coach in the league? He's most certainly top 5. Maybe we should break that down a little bit later in the show. Who are the 5 best coaches in the NBA? But for now, let's talk about this. Would you take Brad Stevens over, I don't know, would you take him over Kristaps Porziņģis? Would you take him over Karl-Anthony Towns? If you're trying to win a championship over the next 5 years, how many players would you take over Brad Stevens? I mean, Jalen makes a massively fascinating point right there. You took away the Celtics' 3 best players. How many coaches can you do that with and say, I'm going to take away not just your star, Kyrie Irving, I'm going to take away your would-be secondary star, his running buddy, before he ever really gets a chance to play in your uniform in Gordon Hayward. And right when the semifinals kicks off, I'm going to take away your 3rd best, or maybe 4th if you want to have a debate about Jason Tatum versus Jaylen Brown, but your emerging star in Jaylen Brown. Take away Kyrie, take away Gordon Hayward, take away Jaylen Brown, and what do you have? 1 game up in the Eastern Conference semifinals. That's stunning. Stunning by Brad Stevens. This guy is amazing. So, how many players would you take before you get to the name Brad Stevens to build your franchise around? My answer to you is 8. I think then there are 4 more that are debatable. I think definitely over the next 3 years, and probably over the next 5, you would still take LeBron James. I think you would take Kevin Durant. That gives us 2. I think you would take Steph Curry. That gives you 3. James Harden, Anthony Davis. I was in the 56% that said I would take Giannis over Brad Stevens. That gives you 6 names. Now, I would take the 2 players on the other side of this equation from Brad Stevens. I would take 2 players playing for the 76ers. I'd take Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid as well before I got to the name Brad Stevens. Rudy, how many names is that I've listed off?
That is 8.
That's right. Now I think you get to the debatable part. To me, would you rather have Brad Stevens than Kawhi Leonard?
I don't think so. I think I'd take Kawhi.
Would you rather have Brad Stevens than Russ Westbrook?
I know, and because of what just happened in that series, everyone's going to take Brad Stevens. Wow, that's difficult. Like, you couldn't find 2 more opposite things, right? Like, team guy Brad Stevens, like, gets the best out of everybody, or just the singular entity that is Russell Westbrook. I still think I take Westbrook.
Would you take Brad Stevens over karl-Anthony Towns?
I would take Towns.
Would you take Brad Stevens over Kristaps Porziņģis?
I think I would take Stevens.
We found your line.
I think I would take Stevens.
We found your line. I would take 8 names. I would take Stevens over Russ. I would take Stevens over Kawhi. I would take Stevens over Towns. We both would take Stevens over Porziņģis. So for me, I would take Stevens 9th in my player draft ratings for the next 5 years. You would take Stevens, what is that? 12th in your draft rankings over the next 5 years trying to win a championship. The hard thing about this is, Rudy, where would you take Stevens in comparison to his competition? Where would you take him compared to other coaches?
Well,
where would you take him compared to Pop, to Carlisle, to Spoelstra?
I just want to be clear, too. You're saying you would take Stevens over any player on the Celtics right now.
Yes. How would you not say that? He's winning with his big 3 out, his 3 top. I mean, I guess you can have the Brown-Tatum debate every time we have this conversation, but for the sake of this conversation, he's winning without Jaylen Brown, Kyrie Irving, and Gordon Hayward. I think it's clear you'd take Stevens over any single one of them. You disagree?
I think I agree with you. Because I don't think Jaylen Brown specifically, if he was in another organization, say he was drafted by like the Knicks or the Magic or even your Mavs, he's not this guy. He's not this guy. And I'm not even trying to disrespect him at all. I just think Brad Stevens is that good at developing talent. Same thing with Tatum. I think Tatum would be a good player in the league. I don't think he'd be this good this early. I don't think Terry Rozier without Brad Stevens would be as good as he is. He'd still be a good player, but he wouldn't be dropping 29 in a playoff game.
I think it's 8 players. I think it's 8 players in the NBA you can safely say give you a better shot than Brad Stevens does to win an NBA championship over the next 5 years.